What if Tywin Lannister discovered Jon Snow's bloodline first and offered him the Iron Throne to destroy the Starks from within? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. Casterly Rock sits above the sunset sea like a fist carved from the earth itself. It is ancient, older than the Lannister name, older than the kingdom that name helped build, and it rises from the western coast of the Westerlands so high that ships on the horizon can see its towers before they see the cliffs beneath them. Gold banners hang from every parapet, and the Lion of House Lannister looks down on the sea, and below that, on everything else in the realm. Tywin Lannister sits in his solar on the rock's highest occupied floor. He is 56 years old, tall even seated, with a lean frame that has not softened with age the way Robert Baratheon's has. His hair is gone. His eyes are green, with a hard gold fleck at the center, the kind of eyes that do not move much, because they do not need to. When Tywin Lannister looks at something long enough, it tends to arrange itself according to his wishes. News from King's Landing has been arriving by Raven for the past fortnight. Ned Stark has ridden south to take the Hand's Chain. Robert Baratheon has dragged his oldest friend out of the north and planted him in the seat that Tywin himself once held. The Stark-Lannister tension that has simmered since the sack of King's Landing 15 years ago is now going to play out in the corridors of the Red Keep. With Ned Stark asking questions Tywin does not want answered, and the king too drunk and too careless to manage any of it, Tywin watches all of this from Casterly Rock. He has refused the court, refused Robert's invitation to return to service, and will continue to refuse. He does not go where he is not the most powerful man in the room. But this morning, something else has arrived, and it is not a raven from King's Landing. A rider came in before dawn, a man from the Citadel by the look of his seal. One of the paid agents Tywin keeps in Old Town for exactly this kind of purpose. He handed a sealed pouch to the captain of the gate with instructions that it go only to Lord Tywin directly. The captain obeyed. Everyone at Casterly Rock always does. Tywin opens the pouch and draws out 2 documents. He lays them side by side on the table and begins to read. The first is a transcription from the Citadel's archive. A Septon named Maynard made a notation in his journal some 17 years ago, describing 2 ceremonies he had witnessed. The first was an annulment, the dissolution of the marriage between Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and Princess Elia of House Martell, carried out quietly outside the conventions of the faith. The second was a marriage conducted before a heart tree between that same prince and a woman of the north. Septon Maynard did not record the woman's full name. He did not need to. Lyanna Stark had disappeared from the world at roughly the same time and had never been seen alive again after the rebellion. The second document is a list of 3 names: Arthur Dayne, Oswell Went, Gerald Hightower. Beside each name is a notation: last confirmed position, Tower of Joy, dawn, late in the year 282 AC. Tywin reads both documents twice. Then he sets them down and looks at the wall. The 3 names are the important part. Arthur Dayne was the finest knight in living memory, a man whose skill made him something close to legend in his own lifetime. All 3 were sworn to the Kingsguard, bound to protect the king with their lives. In 282 AC, the king was Aerys Targaryen in the Red Keep. Rhaegar had ridden north to the Trident to meet Robert Baratheon and had died there with a warhammer caving in his chest at the Ruby Ford. Aerys was in King's Landing. Rhaegar was at the Trident and then dead. 3 of the realm's finest knights were guarding a tower in Dorne. Tywin does not need a maester to complete the picture. The 3 Kingsguard were not protecting the king. They were not guarding the prince because the prince was dead. They were guarding something Rhaegar had placed above the war, above his own survival. above everything else. And they stayed until Ned Stark arrived with a small company and took it from them by force, losing most of that company in the doing. Ned Stark came home from that tower with a baby boy and no mother's name. Tywin knows what every lord in the Seven Kingdoms knows about the bastard at Winterfell. He has a name, Jon Snow. In the northern fashion, he has dark hair and grey eyes, no Targaryen silver, no visible trace of dragon blood in his face. He looks like Ned Stark's son. And that is exactly what Ned Stark has told the world for 15 years. No woman named. No story of a brief encounter. Just the boy, existing as a fact that no one was invited to question. Ned Stark is the most honest man in the Seven Kingdoms. His reputation for honor is so absolute that it has become almost a liability, a thing his enemies rely on as surely as his friends do. He does not lie. He does not scheme. Every lord who has dealt with Eddard Stark for more than a season knows this about him. And this man has kept one secret for 15 years. Tywin sits with that for a moment. Robert came to Winterfell a fortnight ago, with the whole court and the full weight of the crown behind him. Ned Stark stood with him in the yard, in front of the bastard, and said nothing. Not one word in 15 years. There is only one thing a man like Ned Stark protects with a lie. He protects a child from a death he cannot prevent by any other means. Tywin regards the two documents on the table. He thinks about Robert Baratheon, the man who killed Rhaegar at the Ruby Ford, and has spent the years since drinking and hunting, and pretending the blood on his hands was washed clean by a crown. Robert hated Targaryens, the way the devout hate heresy. He killed them when he found them. He would have killed this one too, bastard seeming or not, if he had ever known the truth. The boy at Castle Black, preparing to swear his life away to the Night's Watch, is Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, born of a secret marriage witnessed by a septon of the Citadel, which makes him true-born by any reading of law in the Seven Kingdoms, which makes his claim to the Iron Throne superior to Robert's, who was a usurper, superior to Joffrey's, who carries Lannister blood in a Baratheon name, superior to Stannis Baratheon's, who has a strong jaw and a strong sense of a grievance, but is the second son of a man who rode to war for another man's cause. Tywin walks to the window. Below him the sunset sea glitters in the morning light. He thinks about Joffrey, age 12, golden-haired and likely to be on the Iron Throne within the year. He thinks about Cersei. He thinks about what Ned Stark is going to find if he looks carefully enough at the children Cersei has raised in the Red Keep, and what Ned Stark will do with it. Because Ned Stark always does exactly what a man of perfect honor does when he finds a truth. He speaks it. Tywin sits back down and picks up his quill. Hay writes the first letter to his son Tyrion, who is at the wall, lingering there after his visit as is Tyrion's habit, always looking for an education in unlikely places. The letter is brief. Stay. There is a boy at Castle Black named Jon Snow. Deliver the enclosed letter into his hands alone. Then bring him south if he chooses to come. Do not open the second letter. Do not ask questions that do not need answering yet. He writes the second letter. It is addressed to Jon Snow, Castle Black, and it contains no accusations, no threats, no promises of gold or glory. It contains only questions. Why did 3 of the realm's finest Kingsguard die defending a tower in Dorne after Rhaegar Targaryen was already dead at the Trident? Why has no one ever named the mother of Ned Stark's bastard in 15 years? Why does the most honest man in Westeros protect one secret with such perfect, unbroken silence? At the bottom of the page, 2 words only. Come south. Tywin folds both letters, seals them with plain wax bearing no house sigil, and calls for a rider. He has always been patient. The Seven Kingdoms have spent 30 years learning that lesson about him. But somewhere far to the north, on the edge of the world, a boy with dark, stark hair and grey eyes is about to swear his life away to a castle of ice and a lifetime of nothing. And Tywin Lannister has just written the letter that will stop him. Jon Snow has been at Castle Black for 6 days when the letter arrives. 6 days is not long enough to know a place, but it is long enough to understand what kind of place it is. Castle Black sits at the base of the wall, and the wall is the first thing a man sees when he rides north out of the haunted forest, and the trees begin to thin, and the sky opens up ahead of him. Jon had heard about the wall his whole life. He had heard the numbers: 700 feet of black ice, 300 miles from the frost fangs in the west to the sea in the east, older than the kingdoms below it, older than any name still spoken in the realm. He had heard them and thought he understood them. He did not understand them until he stood at the wall's base and looked up and up and up, and could not find the top of it without tilting his head all the way back. It does not look built. It looks like something the world grew before men arrived to name it. Castle Black beneath it is smaller than Jon expected, and grimmer, a cluster of keeps and towers pressed up against the ice, like men sheltering from wind, most of them half derelict, the stone worn smooth by years and weather. The great hall holds more empty seats than occupied ones. The yards are drilled by men who wear their black coats the way old soldiers wear scars, without thinking about them, as part of what they are. Some of the men here were once soldiers in lords' armies. Some were criminals who chose the black over the block. Some were lords' younger sons, with no inheritance and no prospects, and nothing to show for their name but the name itself. Jon watches them from the yard's edge in the grey morning light and understands, without anyone having to tell him, that he is looking at the rest of his life. He is 15 years old, and he has dark, stark hair and grey eyes, the same colouring his father carried, and his father before him down through 8,000 years of Starks holding the North. He is a Stark in every particular that can be seen. He is not a Stark in the one particular that matters, which is that he has no claim to the name and no right to anything that goes with it. Robb is at Winterfell. Robb has the castle, and the seat, and the inheritance, and the future, the one Ned built for him over 14 years of lordship. Jon has a name that begins with a region and ends with nothing, and he has had it for 15 years, and it has never stopped feeling like a verdict. He gave Arya her sword needle before he left Winterfell. He had it made for her, a blade thin and quick, right for her size and her temper, and she had gripped it with both hands and looked at him with those fierce grey eyes, and he had said goodbye. He had ridden north with his uncle, the first ranger of the Night's Watch, through the gate and into the gift, and up to this place, and he had not allowed himself to look back as Winterfell's towers disappeared behind them. He has not stopped thinking about it since. The oath is close now. A few more days, maybe less. He has heard it spoken in this same yard by men finishing their training, their voices flat and steady in the cold air, rising toward the wall as if the wall itself were listening. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. He knows every word of it. He will stand here and speak them, and then he will belong to the Watch, and the Watch will be the whole of the world, and there will be nothing before him but the cold and the black and the years. He is not sorry. He has told himself this enough times that he has almost come to believe it. Tyrion Lannister has been at Castle Black longer than he planned. He came north with the royal party's return from Winterfell, and diverted to the Wall because the Wall was there, And Tyrion goes toward things that interest him, which is most things. He is 25 years old and a dwarf, with a pale face and a large head and eyes that do not match, one green and one closer to black. He walks with a rolling gait through Castle Black's yard, as if he owns it, which is not a Lannister pretension so much as a habit of mind. He does not seem embarrassed by anything. Jon has never met anyone who was less embarrassed by anything. Ghost is at Jon's feet the evening Tyrion finds him near the gate, the white direwolf folded up in the dirt, ears flat, watching Tyrion approach with the red-eyed calm that Ghost turns on most things. "You have been standing here for an hour," Tyrion says. He settles himself against the wall beside Jon, with the care a short man uses on surfaces built for taller ones. "I was thinking," Jon says. "You are always thinking. That is the problem." Tyrion looks up at the wall, where the last light of the afternoon is turning the ice a color that is almost blue. "The bastard's brooding. I know it better than most. It runs in the same channel every time, around the same obstacles, and it never arrives anywhere useful." Jon looks at him. "I spent 25 years mastering it," Tyrion says. "Let me spare you the learning." He turns to Jon more directly. "Wear the name like armor. Give it a point. Own it before someone else does. And then the people who want to use it against you will find there is nothing left to use." Jon says, "Does that work?" Tyrion is quiet for a moment. Ghost shifts, puts his large pale head back down on his paws. "Not always," Tyrion admits, "but it works. Better than the alternative." Jon says nothing. He looks back at the wall, and Tyrion does not push further. It is one of Tyrion's better qualities. Jon has noticed, but he knows when a thing is finished. They stand there together until the cold deepens, and Tyrion excuses himself for supper, and Jon stays a little while longer in the grey evening, not going anywhere in particular. He is still near the gate when the rider arrives. The horse is not a Night's Watch horse. Jon can tell by the animal's look and by the look of the man on it, a man in plain traveling clothes with no badge or colors anywhere on him, the kind of man who earns his living going quietly from one place to another without attracting questions. He speaks to the guard at the gate, and the guard calls for Jon Snow, and Jon comes forward. The man hands him a sealed letter and waits only long enough to confirm he has put it in the right hands. Then he wheels his horse and rides back into the dark. The letter is sealed with plain wax, no house sigil pressed into it, no name on the outside, only the address in a clean, deliberate hand. Jon Snow, Castle Black, the Night's Watch. Jon breaks the seal and reads. There are no greetings. There is no signature. There are only questions. Why did 3 of the realm's finest Kingsguard die defending a tower in Dorne, after Rhaegar Targaryen was already dead at the Trident? Why has no woman ever been named as the mother of Ned Stark's bastard in 15 years? Why does the most honest man in Westeros protect one secret above all others with such perfect, unbroken silence? Then a gap of empty parchment. Then, at the bottom, 2 words only. Come south. Jon reads it again. Then, a 3rd time. The cold off the wall pushes against his face, and Ghost pads up beside him, nose working, the big white head pushing briefly against Jon's hand. Jon does not sleep that night. He stands at the wall's base, where the dark is coldest and the ice gives off its ancient chill, and the stars above Castle Black are very clear and very far away. And he stays there as they turn on their slow wheel across the winter sky. He reads the letter again in the darkness, holding it up until his eyes adjust enough to trace the shapes of the words. Then he folds it, and holds it, and stares at the ice. 3 Kingsguard at a tower in Dorne. 3 of the finest in the realm, after Rhaegar was already dead at the Ruby Ford. He has grown up hearing about the Tower of Joy the way Northerners grow up hearing about old battles, the way the dead accumulate into stories. He knows that his father went south to that tower and came back with one companion alive and a baby that no one had asked him to explain. He has never asked his father to explain it either, because every time he tried, the words turned to ash before he could form them. Why has no woman ever been named? The oath waits ahead of him at the other end of the dark. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. He knows every syllable of it. Jon stares at the wall, and the stars move, and he does not close his eyes. The ice elevator platform is a rough wooden cage on chains thick as a man's arm, bolted to the wall's face near the base of Castle Black. During the day, it groans and sways with the wind. At night, it is still. Jon is sitting on the platform's edge when Tyrion finds him, legs hanging over the side, the opened letter in his hands, and the pre-dawn dark pressing down on both of them like something breathing. Tyrion has a lamp. He holds it up and looks at Jon's face, and what he sees makes him set the lamp down carefully and sit. My father wrote to me, Tyrion says. Jon does not look up from the letter. His letter, to me, said that you would receive a letter. It said I was to stay until you read it, and that if you chose to come south, I was to bring you. He pauses. It did not say where exactly. It said the road would make that clear. Your father wrote me questions, Jon says, not answers. That is very much how my father works. Tyrion folds his hands in his lap. He does not give things away before he knows their value. He looks at Jon steadily. But I will tell you one thing without his permission, and you can decide what to do with it. My father does not write letters for nothing. He does not spend interest before he has seen the principal. Whatever that letter points at, it is not small. The back is blank. He folds it and puts it inside his coat. The wall above them is a blackness within the black sky, distinguished only by the way it blocks out the stars. 700 feet of ice, and somewhere above it the cold wind moves, always moving. Jon has listened to it for 6 nights. If I go with you, Jon says, and whatever this is turns out to be a Lannister game, I will have left the watch for nothing. And the vows will still be waiting. I am expected at the ceremony at dawn. You are, Tyrion agrees. He does not dress this up. Jon is quiet. In the yard below them, nothing moves yet. The grey hour before the first trumpet is Castle Black, at its most empty, when the night watch has come in and the day watch has not risen, and the whole castle is a held breath. He has a few hours at most before the muster, before someone comes looking, before the oath is spoken and the morning moves on without him. He thinks about the vows. He has thought about little else for 6 days. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. Each clause of that oath is a door closing, and he has been walking toward the row of them since Winterfell, telling himself it was the right thing, that the right thing felt the way it was supposed to feel when you chose it. It does not feel the way it is supposed to feel. It feels like a sentence. He thinks about the letter. 3 Kingsguard at a tower in Dorne after Rhaegar was dead. 15 years of silence from the most honest man in the realm on the one subject he never explains. The mother whose name Jon has never been given, not by anyone saying so directly, but by something in his father's face that closes whenever the question gets close. He has asked Ned once, not directly. He circled it the way you circle a fire, unsure how near you can get. They were alone in the yard at Winterfell, and Jon had said something about wanting to know where he came from, and Ned had gone very still the way Ned does when he is deciding something, and then had said, The next time we see each other, we will talk about your mother." Jon had gone north before they spoke again. "Whatever the letter implies," Jon says, "if it is what it sounds like, then my father knew and did not tell me." Tyrion says nothing. "He said we would talk about my mother. The next time we saw each other. He has known whatever this is, and he sent me to the wall. I do not know what the letter says." Tyrion says carefully, "No." Jon looks up at the wall. "But you know your father, and your father does not spend interest before he has seen the principal. He wrote to a boy at Castle Black 2 days from his vows. There is a reason it could not wait." Tyrion picks up his lamp and looks at it for a moment, his mismatched eyes, one green and one almost black, are very still. Jon has noticed that when Tyrion is thinking seriously, the wit falls away, and something underneath it appears, something much sharper. "If I had to guess," Tyrion says slowly, "I would say that whatever my father knows, it has a shelf, and the shelf ends when you take those vows at dawn." Jon stands from the platform's edge. The cold off the wall settles into cloth and skin alike. He has a few hours. He stands and looks at the yard below him, and at the dark line of the wall above him, and at the stars it cuts off. "If I ride south with you," he says, "I am not doing it for your father. I understand that. I am doing it because I have asked one question my whole life and never been given an answer. Your father's letter says the answer exists." Tyrion nods once. He does not try to say more. He stands, takes up his lamp, and waits. Jon goes to his quarters. He does not write a note. He does not leave an explanation for the Lord Commander, or for his uncle, or for anyone who might come looking, when the first trumpet sounds and one recruit is missing from the yard. He takes his traveling cloak and his gloves and the letter, and then goes to Ghost's pen, where the white direwolf is already standing, already awake, those red eyes steady in the dark. "Come on," Jon says quietly. They walk to the stables. Tyrion's horse is already saddled, which tells Jon that Tyrion had decided how this was going to end before he came to find him on the platform. Jon tacks his own horse without hurrying. Ghost moving silently between the stalls, the other horses pressing to the back of their boxes at the White Wolf's approach. They ride out through the gate before first light. The wall's shadow stretches out behind them as they turn south onto the King's Road. Vast and cold enough to reach past the castle and past the first trees and out into the gift like a second night laid over the first. Tyrion is quiet for the first mile. This is unusual enough that Jon notices it. Tyrion is a man who fills silences naturally, the way water finds low ground, and when he stops doing it, something is happening behind the parts of his face he shows to the world. Jon rides with Ghost, ranging at the road's edge, the white shape moving through the grey morning, like something that does not fully belong to daylight. He does not look back at the wall. He does not permit himself to. They ride south without speaking. The trees close in on either side, and the light rises slowly through the branches, grey first, and then the pale, cold gold of early morning. The sound of hooves on the road fills the space between them. "You are going to ask me what the letter said," Jon says after a time. "I was waiting until you were ready to tell me," Tyrion says. "It asked 3 questions. About 3 Kingsguard at a tower in dawn. About my mother's name. About my father's silence." Jon watches the road ahead. That is all, just the questions. Tyrion looks at him from the corner of his eye. Jon can feel the look without turning to meet it. Tyrion is looking at his dark hair and his grey eyes, and at whatever else Tyrion is adding up in that quick head of his. Then Tyrion looks at the road. "Your father," Tyrion begins, and then stops. I know. Jon says. They ride on. It is not an unfriendly silence. It is the kind that settles between two people who both understand that the ground they are crossing is uncertain, and that going slowly is better than not going at all. Neither of them has anything to offer the other yet, and they both know it, and they ride with that understanding between them without it needing to be named. The wall is still visible above the tree line for a long stretch, that massive dark line across the northern sky, ruler straight, impossibly tall. Jon knows it is there without looking. He felt it behind him the whole length of the haunted forest when he rode north, and he feels it behind him now going south, and it is the same feeling, only pointed the other way. Castle Black disappears behind the horizon before the morning is properly light. Jon Snow, age 15, has left the Night's Watch before swearing to it. The vows are behind him unsaid, and the road ahead goes to a place he has not been for reasons he cannot yet name clearly, to answer questions he has carried his whole life without knowing they were questions. He knows only what he is riding away from. Casterly Rock is not a castle built upon a rock. It is a castle carved into one. The rock itself is a colossal natural formation rising from the western coast of the Westerlands, where the land meets the sunset sea, so vast and so sheer that it dwarfs every structure men have cut into its face and piled onto its summit. Gold banners hang from the uppermost towers, crimson lions on gold. And, from the coastal road approaching from the east, the whole thing looks less like somewhere people live and more like somewhere power goes to contemplate itself. Jon rides toward it, with Ghost alongside his horse, and Tyrion just ahead, on the road. He does not say anything about the rock, because there is nothing useful to say. It is the seat of the wealthiest house in the Seven Kingdoms, in the most natural fortress the Seven Kingdoms contain. He has spent 15 years as Ned Stark's bastard in a cold northern castle, and he knows the difference between a building that protects people and a building that announces them. Casterly Rock announces. The household receives Tyrion as a lord's son, which is to say, with a careful courtesy that contains within it a precise record of every insult accumulated over 25 years of being Tywin Lannister's smallest disappointment. Jon watches the servants and the stewards and understands that Tyrion is not loved here. He is known. That is different. Tyrion moves through it without visible reaction. He has had 25 years to develop the Arna. He introduces Jon to the household master as a guest of Lord Tywin's, and no one asks further questions, because no one in Casterly Rock asks questions that Tywin has not indicated he wants asked. Then a steward comes for Tyrion with a message, and Tyrion looks at Jon once with an expression that is impossible to read and says, "He wants to see you alone." A second steward leads Jon up through the rock's-carved corridors and away. Tywin Lannister's solar is high in the rock with a window that looks out over the sunset sea. It is a large room and nearly bare, the way rooms are when the person who inhabits them does not need decoration to establish what they are. A table, 2 chairs, a map rack, shelves of ledgers, and the man himself, seated behind the table with the stillness of something that has been sitting in the same place for a very long time. He is tall even seated, lean, with wide shoulders that carry age the way old stone carries weather. Bald. His eyes are pale green with a hard gold fleck at the center, and they do not move quickly, because they do not need to. He is looking at Jon the way a man reads a document he has already read once, checking for anything missed on the first pass. On the table before him lie 2 documents. "Sit," Tywin says. Jon sits. Tywin turns the first document around so Jon can read it. It is a transcription from a citadel archive. a septon's notation about two ceremonies, an annulment carried out outside the faith's normal channels, and a marriage conducted before a heart tree. Jon reads it to the bottom. He has seen the questions in the letter. This is the answer. Behind the questions, Tywin turns the second document. 3 names, last known position: Arthur Dane, Oswell Went, Gerald Hightower, Tower of Joy, Dawn, late 282 AC. Tywin speaks then, and he does it the way a man presents a case to a council, clearly and in order, and without emphasis or color. The annulment of Rhaegar Targaryen's marriage to Elia Martell. The secret marriage before a heart tree in Dawn. The tower in the Red Mountains, where 3 of the realm's finest Kingsguard stood their ground after Rhaegar was dead at the Ruby Ford, guarding something the prince had valued above the war and above his own life. Ned Stark arriving at that tower with 6 companions, only 2 walking out. Ned Stark returning to Winterfell with a baby and a silence that had now lasted 15 years. The conclusion Tywin states without preamble. The boy raised as Jon Snow is Aegon Targaryen, 6th of his name, true-born son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, born of a marriage that predates Robert's throne, and every claim Robert has built on top of the rebellion. Jon's claim to the Iron Throne is superior to Robert's, who was a usurper, superior to Joffrey's, whose blood tells a different story than his name, superior to Stannis Baratheon's or his brother Renly's. By every law of succession, if the evidence is proven, the crown belongs to the boy sitting in this chair. Jon has been listening with the stillness of someone who is very cold inside. He looks at the 2 documents. He looks at Tywin's face, which has not changed expression during any of this, and thinks, this man knew this before he wrote the letter. He has been holding it the way a man holds a weapon, waiting to understand what it is for. And what do you want for it? Jon says. The offer comes with the same absence of flourish as the facts. House Lannister will stand behind the claim. Gold, armies, a political network built over 40 years. All of it behind Aegon Targaryen. In exchange, Jon goes to King's Landing. He uses the Stark name, the Stark upbringing, the Stark face. And when Ned Stark finds what he is already looking for, the truth about the Queen's children and their right to the throne, Jon ensures that Ned is stopped before he can act on it. The North will follow a Stark. Jon keeps the Northern Lords from becoming the instrument of Ned's honor, Ned's recklessness, and Ned's certain destruction. Jon is very still for a long moment. No, he says. Tywin waits. Ned Stark is my father. Jon's voice has something hard in it, harder than he has heard from himself before. He raised me. His children are my family. I will not be used to destroy them. His expression does not change. And that is the most unsettling thing about the man. He does not react to resistance the way other men do. He does not harden or flush. He simply continues. Ned Stark, Tywin says, lied to you for 15 years. Jon says nothing. His protection gave you a bastard's name and a bastard's future. You were 2 days from swearing your life away to a frozen castle and a lifetime of black coats. No lands, no wife, no children, no name that will survive you. That was Ned Stark's gift to the true-born heir of the Iron Throne, his silence over your birthright in exchange for his own peace of mind. He was protecting me, Jon says, from Robert. He was protecting himself from a choice. Tywin sets his hands flat on the table. I am not asking you for gratitude. I am asking you for a decision. What you are is a fact. What you do with it is the only question left. Jon stands. He walks to the window and looks out at the sunset sea, at the long flat grey of it and the light moving on the water. He has never seen the sea before. He stands with his back to Tywin and thinks about Winterfell, about Robb and Arya and the cold mornings in the yard, about Ned standing in the great hall with his grey eyes and his gravity and the silence that was always in him, like a stone in still water. He turns back. "I want to go to King's Landing first," Jon says. "I want to see him before I decide anything." Tywin looks at him for a moment. That is acceptable. Jon waits for a condition. Tywin does not offer one. "I am in no hurry," Tywin says. He picks up the two documents and aligns them carefully with the edge of the table. "I have always had time." He believes it is what Tywin wants him to think, which is not the same thing. But he is 15 years old and alone in the seat of the wealthiest house in the Seven Kingdoms. And the most dangerous man in the realm has just told him his whole life has been a lie. And the road ahead of him forks in ways he cannot see clearly yet. He will go to King's Landing. He will look at his father's face. He will decide then. He does not notice, walking out of the solar, that Tywin never once told him that no was an option. With Tywin Lannister, it never is. King's Landing hits Jon like a wall before he even passes through its gates. The smell comes first. The collective press of 500,000 people living stacked on the hills above the Blackwater Rush. The tanneries, and the cook fires, and the fish markets, and the mud of the streets after rain. All of it rising into the air above the city, in a way that no northern wind disperses. Then the sound. The constant, dense noise of a city that is always doing 10 things at once. Carts and voices and hammers and animals, and the bells from the sept towers carrying over everything. Jon has grown up in Winterfell and spent weeks at the Wall, and neither of those places prepared him for the scale of this. He rides through the gate, and the city simply swallows him. Above it all sits the Red Keep, on Aegon's high hill at the city's center. Its towers and parapets rising against the sky, with the easy permanence of a structure that has stood since the first Targaryen dragged a continent to heel. That is where the Iron Throne waits, inside those walls, in the throne room where every king since Aegon the Conqueror has sat and ruled and eventually died. His birthright, Tywin said. Jon looks up at the Red Keep as he rides and tries to feel something about that word, and cannot quite manage it. He finds Ned in the Tower of the Hand. Ned is at his desk, deep in papers, and he does not hear Jon come in. Jon stands in the doorway for a moment and looks at his father. Ned is 35 years old, dark-haired and grey-eyed, with the long, stark face and the grave bearing that has always made him seem older than he is. He looks 10 years older than the man who rode north to Winterfell a few weeks ago, the weight of King's Landing already pressed into the lines around his eyes and the set of his jaw. The city does something to men from the north. Jon can see it happening in real time. Then Ned looks up, and his face changes completely. The relief is immediate and visible, the way it is with a man who has been frightened for something, and then found it safe. And then just as quickly something else comes, a tightness behind the eyes, a wariness. Jon is not at the Wall. Jon is in King's Landing. And Jon has not ridden south from the Wall for any reason Ned could have imagined. Jon looks at his father and sees two things at once. The man who raised him and was good to him, and is written into every memory Jon has of warmth and safety. And the man who kept a secret for 15 years that changed the shape of Jon's entire life. Both of those men are in the room. Jon does not know yet which one he is standing in front of. They talk for a time, careful and guarded, both of them measuring. Jon does not show Ned the letter yet. He is not ready for that. He says only that he came south, that he has things to sort through. And Ned accepts this with the patience of a man who has been waiting for this particular conversation for 15 years and is not sure he is ready for it either. Sansa and Arya are in the Tower of the Hand's lower rooms, and Jon finds them before supper. Sansa is 12, auburn-haired and blue-eyed, with the Tully colouring their mother gave her, and the careful, graceful manner she has been practicing since she was old enough to understand that her future depended on it. She is glad to see Jon, and shows it with the measured warmth she extends to everyone, smiling and proper, and slightly careful even with her own brother. She has been betrothed to Prince Joffrey, and she is in the process of becoming a person fit for what that betrothal requires. Jon looks at her and feels a kind of sadness he cannot name. Arya is 9. She has stark colouring, the dark brown-grey of Jon's own hair, and the long, stark face. And she is none of the things Sansa is currently working at being. She hits Jon in the arm when she sees him, and demands to know why he is in King's Landing and not at the Wall. And, when he says he changed his mind, she looks at him with those grey eyes and says, "You never change your mind about anything." And Jon does not have an answer to that. Needle is at her hip. She keeps her hand near it, the way you keep your hand near something that belongs to you. Jon holds on to this for a moment longer than he needs to. Then he goes to find the rest of what Tywin sent him to see. He does not go looking for Cersei Lannister. She is simply there, in the corridor outside the Great Hall, moving through the Red Keep with the authority of a woman who has learned to treat every room as territory she is defending. She is 32 years old, golden-haired and green-eyed, and she is very beautiful in the way of someone who understands beauty as a resource and manages it accordingly. She does not know who Jon is. He is a dark-haired northern boy in the halls of the Red Keep. A nobody, Ned Stark's guest at most. She notices him anyway. He sees the moment it happens. She glances at him in passing, and then glances again. Something caught in her expression, not recognition, but something like recognition's first cousin. He has stark dark hair and grey eyes, but his bearing is quiet, in a way that Stark men are not usually quiet. She studies him for a half-second, and then files him away behind her eyes, and moves on. Jon watches her go, and thinks about what Tywin told him, and about what Ned is looking for in the papers on his desk upstairs. He sees Joffrey from across a courtyard the following morning. The prince is 12 years old, golden-haired and green-eyed, laughing at something one of his companions has said, and he has the kind of laugh that only works when you are certain the people around you have no choice but to find you funny. The golden Lannister look is unmistakable on him. The hair, the eyes, the fine-boned face that carries no trace of Robert Baratheon's broad, dark features. Jon Arryn saw it. Ned Stark is seeing it. Jon sees it now from across a courtyard and understands, with the cold part of his mind, that Tywin's visit opened, exactly what it means. This boy is sitting on a claim to the Iron Throne that Jon has a stronger right to. Not by ambition, not because Jon asked for it. Simply by the fact of his birth and a marriage that Rhaegar Targaryen contracted before a heart tree 15 years ago. Jon watches Joffrey laugh and feels nothing in particular, which is its own kind of information. Tyrion finds him that evening in one of the Red Keep's lower passages, a quiet stretch of corridor near the servants' quarters, where neither of them is likely to be noticed. "You have been watching everyone," Tyrion says. "I have been watching you watch everyone." Tyrion looks at him with those mismatched eyes, one green and one near black. He has been thinking since Casterly Rock, Jon can tell. The wit is still there, but it is thinner than usual. Something under it, pushing against the surface. "Whatever my father offered you," Tyrion says, "consider what you know of him." He pauses, not for effect, but because he is choosing the words carefully. He does not create kings. He creates instruments. He has done it all his life, and when the instrument has served its purpose, he does not keep it. He discards it. Tyrion looks at the wall. The day you are no longer useful to him, you will be the one thing a Lannister does not maintain. Jon looks at him for a moment. Then he says, "Does your father care about you?" The question sits in the air between them. Tyrion is quiet for longer than he usually allows himself to be quiet. The corridor is very still. He cares about the family. Tyrion says at last, "I am part of the family." There is a difference. Jon says nothing. He does not need to. He understands perfectly. Because he has spent 15 years in a house that cared about its name and its future and its heirs, and he knows exactly where a person lands when they are part of something without being the point of it. He looks at the walls of the Red Keep around them, at the stone that has held the throne of the Seven Kingdoms for nearly 300 years, and he thinks about Tywin Lannister's solar and the 2 documents on the table and the offer that had no stated conditions, because Tywin Lannister does not offer conditions. He presents conclusions and waits for everyone else to arrive at them. Jon is not there yet, but he is closer than he was. The summons comes through a household servant, not a note. That is deliberate. Jon recognizes the deliberateness of it the moment the servant appears at his door and says only that Lord Stark would like to see him, upstairs, privately. No written record. No name on paper. Ned Stark is careful even in this. The upper chamber of the Tower of the Hand is a small room, sparsely furnished, the kind of room a man uses when he wants to speak without being heard. Ned is standing when Jon enters, and the servant closes the door behind them, and it is just the 2 of them. For a moment, Ned simply looks at Jon with the relief of a man who has been frightened for something and found it unharmed. Jon is alive. Jon is here. And then, right behind the relief, something else comes in. The questions. Why is Jon here and not at the wall? And what does the look on his face mean? And what has happened between the last time Ned saw him riding north and this moment? Jon reaches into his cloak and takes out the letter. He does not say anything. He holds it out, and Ned takes it with steady hands. And Ned reads it. He reads it once, standing, and Jon watches his father's face and sees the moment each question lands. Why did 3 Kingsguard die in a tower in Dawn? Why has no woman ever been named? Why has the most honest man in Westeros kept one secret for 15 years? And then 2 words, "Come south." Ned folds the letter and holds it, and does not speak for a long time. The room is very quiet. Below the tower, the city goes on making its noise, the constant low roar of King's Landing that Jon has been hearing for days now. But up here, it is muffled enough that it might be happening somewhere else entirely. "Where did you get this?" Ned says. It is not quite a question. "Tyrion Lannister delivered it to Castle Black," Jon says. "His father's agent, Tywin Lannister, wrote it." Ned closes his eyes for a moment. When he opens them, he looks like he has aged another 10 years in the space of a breath. He does not try to deny it. Jon has known all his life that Ned Stark does not lie, not even when the truth costs him everything, and Ned proves it now. No, he does not dress it up, and he does not try to prepare Jon for it. He simply sits down in the chair by the window and begins to speak, and his voice is steady in the way that voices are steady when the emotion behind them is too old and too heavy to still be sharp. He simply puts the stone down, the one he has been carrying since 283 AC, when he walked out of a tower in Dawn with a baby in his arms and a promise in his chest, and a silence he would have to maintain for the rest of his life. Yes, Jon is Rhaegar Targaryen's son. Lyanna Stark was Jon's mother. They were married before a heart tree, witnessed, legitimate, a ceremony conducted in private before the rebellion consumed the realm and made every Targaryen name a death sentence. Rhaegar had annulled his first marriage and wed Lyanna with intention and with witness and with everything the law required. Ned was there when it ended, in that tower in the Red Mountains of Dawn, in the room where Lyanna died in a bed of blood after giving birth to the boy she had brought into the world at the cost of her own life. She made him promise. Her last words were a promise she pressed into him like a blade. "Promise me, Ned." And he did promise her, and he has kept the promise every day since, and he would have kept it forever if a Lannister's letter had not found its way to a wall in the north. Jon listens to all of this without moving. His face is still. Ned watches him the way a man watches a fire he has lit, waiting to see what it catches. "She made you promise." Jon says, "Yes, and the promise was to protect me." "Yes." Ned nods. "Robert would have had you killed. You know what he is, what he was, what he became. He killed Targaryens, wherever he found them. He led the rebellion, because of your mother, and he killed your father with his own hands at the Ruby Ford, and he spent the years after trying to forget both of them with wine and hunting, and the kind of noise that drowns things out. If he had known what you were, what you meant, he would have put you to the sword before you learned to walk. You would have been a threat to his throne and a reminder of everything he fought a war to be free of." Ned looks at his hands. "The lie was the only thing I could give you, the only protection." Jon stands very still for a long moment. He stands still for long enough that Ned begins to speak again, to add something, to explain further, and then Jon says, quietly and very precisely, "You were protecting me." Ned stops. "While I stood in Rob's shadow," Jon says, "and called myself Snow, and learned to think of nothing as everything I would ever be. While I gave away a sword I made for a 9-year-old girl and rode north to a wall of ice to swear my life away to nothing, because there was nothing left for me to be. You were protecting me." The last word is not a question. It is the same word each time, but what is inside it changes as Jon says it, and by the third time it carries something ragged and raw in it, something that is not quite anger and not quite grief, and sits in the space between both of them, like a wound neither one is sure how to close. Ned does not defend himself. He says, "I know," in the voice of a man who has been saying that to himself for 15 years. "Go back to the wall," Ned says, after a long silence. His voice is steady, the voice he uses when he is doing what he believes is right, regardless of what it costs him. "Go back and disappear, and let the secret die the way it was supposed to. The letter found you. That does not mean the secret is finished. I can manage Tywin Lannister. I have managed this for 15 years. You cannot manage Tywin Lannister," Jon says. "I have been to Casterly Rock." The stillness that comes over Ned is absolute. "He already knows," Jon says. "He has known longer than the letter. He showed me the documents, the Citadel record, and the Kingsguard names, and he made me an offer. And when I said I wanted to come here first, he said yes, because he has already decided how this ends." Jon watches his father's face. If I refuse him, he does not go away. He uses the information another way. Against you, against Robert, against everything you have spent 15 years building. He will tell Robert what you have been keeping if it serves him, and Robert will not be kind about it. Ned is quiet for a very long time. He sits down, slowly, in the chair by the window, as if the weight of the room has become too much to stand under. He looks at his hands in his lap, the long-fingered Stark hands, the hands that held a dying girl in a tower in Dawn and took her son from her and carried a promise home across half the continent. He looks at them as if he is trying to remember all the things they have done. "He will destroy us," Ned says, "if you don't give him what he wants." Jon looks at his father sitting in that chair. He looks at the grey in his hair and the new lines around his eyes and the bearing that has always been like stone, like something that does not break, even when it is pressed. And he thinks about Robb at Winterfell, and Arya with Needle at her hip, and Sansa being carefully shaped into something fit for a prince who does not deserve her. "He will destroy us," Jon says, "if I do." Neither of them speaks after that. The room holds the silence between them, with a weight neither one seems willing to break. Jon looks at his father for a long moment, at the grey in Ned's dark hair and the wariness around his grey eyes, at the hands in his lap that are very still. Jon has looked at those hands his whole life, has watched them string a bow and hold a sword and press into his shoulder in approval and grief. And now he knows what else they have done. He knows what tower they reached into. He knows what promise they carried home. Jon leaves first, because there is nothing left to say in that room tonight. He goes down the stairs and out into the corridors of the Tower of the Hand, and back into the Red Keep's noise and motion. And he carries the conversation with him, like a stone of his own. Behind him, Ned Stark sits alone in the upper room, with the letter on the table, and the dark outside the window, and the weight of a promise pressing down on him from all sides. He honored it for 15 years. He does not know, sitting there in the quiet, whether that was the bravest thing he ever did, or the worst mistake he ever made. He is not sure those are different answers. The hunting party rides out through the King's Gate in the middle of the morning, and Jon watches it go from the shadow of a doorway on the upper levels of the Red Keep. Robert Baratheon leads it, as Robert leads everything, loudly, with a cup in his hand, filling the air around him with noise and energy, and the particular enthusiasm of a man who is most alive when doing something physical, and least alive when sitting still on a throne, thinking about consequences. He is 36 years old, and he is fat. There is no more courtly way to say it. He was once a warrior, the greatest of his generation, the man who swung a warhammer that killed a prince at the Ruby Ford and changed the direction of the realm, and the body that did that is still somewhere inside the bulk of him. But it has been buried under years of feasting and drinking, and the willful neglect of a man who won his war and then decided that winning was the end of the effort. His hair is dark going grey. He is laughing too loudly at something one of his companions has said, and his cup is already half empty before he reaches the gate. And Cersei stands at a window above the yard and watches him go with an expression that is entirely blank. Jon watches Cersei watch him. He thinks about the documents Tywin laid on the table at Casterly Rock, and about the children with golden hair and green eyes, and about what Ned has been piecing together in the Tower of the Hand. He watches Robert ride out through the gate and into the Kingswood beyond the city, and he feels the shape of what is coming, the way you feel weather before it arrives. Robert is carried back 3 days later dying. The boar found him in the Kingswood, and the strong wine Cersei had pressed on the squires beforehand found him before the boar did. And the combination of the two left a man who was once the greatest fighter in the realm, slow enough and unsteady enough that what should have been a hunt became a wound. A bad wound, the kind that does not close cleanly and that carries infection in its depths. Robert is brought back to the Red Keep on a litter, grey-faced, labouring to breathe. And the Red Keep closes around the news the way a fist closes around something it does not want to drop. Ned moves quickly. Jon hears it through the household staff, through the particular tension in the corridors that follows a great lord in motion. The way the air changes when someone with that kind of authority is going somewhere with purpose. Ned is preparing to act, He is going to do what Jon Arryn was doing before he died. What every honest man who has looked at Joffrey's golden Lannister face and then looked at Robert Baratheon features eventually arrives at. He is going to name Stannis Baratheon the true heir to the throne. Stannis is a dragonstone, 34 years old, and lean and hard and committed to law above comfort. And by every right of succession that holds in the Seven Kingdoms, if Joffrey is not Robert's son, Stannis is the next king. Jon goes to Ned before Ned can act. He finds him in the Tower of the Hand's upper study. Papers spread across the desk, the look of a man who has made a decision and is now executing it. Ned looks up when Jon comes in, and the look on Jon's face stops him. Jon does not sit down. He stands in front of the desk and says what he has come to say. If Ned names Stannis and attempts to expose Joffrey's parentage, Tywin will release the information about Jon. All of it. The Citadel record, the Kingsguard names, the secret marriage. Tywin will frame it as a betrayal by the hand of the king. Ned Stark, the most trusted man in the realm, who concealed the existence of a true-born Targaryen heir for 15 years and said nothing to the king who trusted him. Ned's credibility will be destroyed. His honor, the thing he has built his whole life around, will be turned into evidence of conspiracy. And his children are in this city. Sansa, 12 years old and betrothed to Joffrey. Arya 9, with needle at her hip and no armor worth speaking of. They will be in the city when it burns. Ned is very still. You are carrying his message, Ned says. I am telling you what he told me, Jon says. I am not his messenger, but he knew I would tell you because he knew you needed to know before you did something that could not be undone. It is the right thing, Ned says. Stannis is the rightful heir. Joffrey is not Robert's son. The realm deserves to know. The realm deserves a great many things, Jon says. That has never been sufficient protection for the people who try to give them to it. Ned stares at the papers on his desk. He has been living in this city long enough to have learned how it works, how the right thing gets swallowed by the expedient thing on a daily basis, and how the men who insist on the right thing anyway tend to end up in the Red Keep's cells. He knows this. He has known it since he arrived, and still he cannot make himself not try. Sansa and Arya, he says. Yes, Jon says. Ned is quiet for a long time. He looks at the window, at the grey sky above King's Landing, at the city that does not care about right and wrong, except insofar as power decides which is which on any given day. He looks at his hands. Jon watches his father fight himself in silence, and it is not a quick fight. In the end, Ned does not act. He cannot name Stannis, cannot expose Joffrey, cannot do any of the things he prepared to do, because his children are in the city, and Tywin Lannister is at Casterly Rock, and the man who has never lied discovers that there are things worse than lying. There are things you cannot say because of who you love. Robert Baratheon dies that night. The news goes through the Red Keep like a fire through dry grass. By morning the announcement is made. The king is dead, and his son Joffrey, first of his name, is king of the Andals and the First Men. Cersei moves with the speed of a woman who has been prepared for exactly this for a long time. The gold cloaks are secured, the small council is assembled, the transition is declared. Joffrey is 12 years old, and golden-haired and green-eyed, and he sits in a high seat and looks out at the assembled lords of the Red Keep, with the expression of someone who has been told all his life that this day was coming, and is now surprised to discover that it has arrived. Ned Stark is still the hand of the king, for now, but the hand serves the king, and the king is Joffrey. and Joffrey belongs entirely to Cersei, and the window that existed when Robert was dying has sealed itself shut. Meanwhile, at Casterly Rock, the ravens arrive. Tywin reads them in order, the way he reads everything without hurrying. Robert Baratheon is dead. Joffrey Baratheon is king. The transition is proceeding as Cersei planned. And Jon Snow, the boy from Castle Black, is still in King's Landing. Still in the city. Still uncommitted. Still undecided. Still carrying a secret that could unmake everything Tywin has built if it falls into the wrong hands, or into the right ones at the wrong moment. Tywin picks up his quill. He writes his next letter to Jon. It is shorter than the first one, shorter even than the cover letter he sent to Tyrion at the Wall. It says only what it needs to say, which is this: the king is dead, the new king is 12 years old, and the clock that Tywin has been patient about for the past several weeks has just started running, whatever Jon intends to do with what he knows. The time for deciding at leisure is over. He seals it with plain wax, no house sigil, and calls for a rider. He has always been patient. But even the most patient men have schedules, and Tywin Lannister's schedule has just accelerated by the death of a king. The lower corridors of the Red Keep are very quiet at night. The servants are in their quarters, the guards at their posts, the great hall empty and dark. And the stone passages below the main floors carry only the distant sounds of a city that never entirely sleeps. Jon walks them alone, ghost padding beside him with the silence that the white dire wolf brings to everything, and turns Tywin's ultimatum over in his mind for what feels like the 100th time since the letter arrived. He has been thinking about what Tyrion told him. He has been thinking about it since the evening Tyrion said it, in a corridor not unlike this one, with those mismatched eyes steady, and something underneath the wit pressing against the surface. He does not create kings. He creates instruments. The day you are no longer useful, you will be the one thing Lannisters do not keep. Jon stops walking. He stands in the dark corridor with Ghost at his side and thinks about what it means for a thing to be an instrument. An instrument is a tool. It does what it is designed to do, and when it has served its purpose, it is set aside, and it has no say in either moment. The craftsman who made it holds all the power. The instrument has only the function it was given, and the moment that function is complete, so is its relevance. The man who holds the instrument is the one who matters. The instrument is only ever the means. Tywin's offer was not the Iron Throne. He sees that now, with a clarity that has been building since Casterly Rock, and that the letter after Robert's death has finally sharpened to a point. The offer was a leash with a throne at the end of it. Tywin wants a Targaryen face on the seat at the Red Keep, while the real power stays where it has always been, at Casterly Rock, in the hands of the man with the gold and the armies, and the 40 years of political architecture that holds the 7 kingdoms together more than any king has ever managed to. The moment Jon sits that throne and becomes the king that Tywin has arranged, the moment he becomes fully useful, he becomes fully controlled. And the moment after that, the moment he tries to be something other than what Tywin designed, he becomes a problem to be solved. He will not be solved. He has spent 15 years as a problem that other people defined and managed on his behalf. He is done with it. Jon goes to find Ned. He finds his father in the Tower of the Hand's upper study, awake despite the late hour, the way Ned has been awake at odd hours since arriving in King's Landing. The city's worries finding him in the dark. Ned looks up when Jon comes in and waits. "I am not going to do what Tywin wants," Jon says. Ned is quiet. Not the way he wants it, not under his control, and not with his hand on the back of my neck for the rest of whatever I become. Jon sits across from him. He wants me to be what he needs, and I am done letting other people decide what I should be. You did it with the best intentions. He will do it for his own purposes. Neither of you asked me. Ned says, "You are 15 years old." I know how old I am. A claim without backing is an allegation, Ned says. You know what you are. That is not the same as having proof that anyone will accept, or an army, or a great lord who will stand and say that this boy's claim is real, and I will put my banners behind it. Without that, you go to the Sept of Baelor and announce yourself, and they take your head off before supper. I know, Jon says. I am not going to the Sept of Baelor. Ned looks at him. Then where? Dragonstone, Jon says. The silence that follows is the particular silence of a man receiving information he was not expecting, and taking a moment to understand its implications. Ned looks at Jon across the desk, with the grey eyes they share, the stark eyes that both of them got from the same long line of northern lords, and Jon can see the calculation happening, the assessment of whether this is foolishness or whether it is something else. Stannis Baratheon, Ned says at last. He has been investigating Cersei's children since before Jon Arryn died. He knows something is wrong with Joffrey's claim. He believes in law and in legitimate succession, the way other men believe in the gods. If I bring him the evidence, the same documents Tywin has, and I tell him what I am, he has to accept it. Not because he likes it, because the law says he has to. Stannis wanted to be king, Ned says. You are telling him that someone else has a better claim. I am telling him that the person with the better claim is offering him the position of hand, and that with me on the throne, the realm is governed by law and not by Lannister gold. Jon pauses. He hates the Lannisters. He hates Joffrey, sitting on a throne he has a stronger right to. I am giving him something he cannot get any other way. A lawful king, and his own place in the lawful order. Ned is quiet for a long time. He turns it over, the way he turns everything over, slowly, looking for the flaws, for the places where the honorable path leads into a marsh. He is not a stupid man. He sees that what Jon is proposing is dangerous and uncertain, and dependent on a great number of things going right that could easily go wrong. He sees all of that. And he sees something else. You are asking me to confirm it, Ned says, when the time comes, publicly. I am telling you that when the time comes, and I name myself, you will not be able to deny it, Jon says. You cannot lie under pressure. You have never been able to. When I stand before witnesses and say my name, and someone asks you whether it is true, you will tell them the truth. You always do. It is not a comfortable acceptance. But it is honest, which is the only kind Ned Stark knows how to make. Go carefully, Ned says. Jon stands. I will. He goes before dawn. He takes nothing that marks him as connected to the Tower of the Hand. No Stark livery. No written correspondence. No trail Cersei's people could follow back to Ned. He takes his cloak and his horse, and Ghost, and he rides out through the Lion Gate, while the sky is still dark, east along the road, toward the coast, toward the narrow sea, toward the volcanic island at the mouth of Blackwater Bay, where a hard man in a hard castle has been waiting for the world to give him what the law says he deserves. He does not tell Tyrion. He does not send word to Casterly Rock. Tywin will learn that the piece he moved is no longer on the square he placed it, and he will not receive that news calmly. And that is fine. Let him receive it the way Jon has been receiving things all his life, as a fact that he did not choose and must now reckon with. In the morning, Cersei learns that Jon Snow is gone. One of her people, in the Red Keep's household, marks his absence. The northern boy who arrived with Ned Stark's household, and who she noticed once in a corridor, the dark-haired one, with the still bearing, and brings the news to her. She stands at her window above the yard, with her golden hair loose and her green eyes steady, and thinks about it. She does not know who Jon Snow is. She does not know what he is. She knows only that he arrived without explanation and left without explanation, and that unexplained things in the Red Keep are either nothing at all or the beginning of something she will wish she had paid attention to sooner. She files it away and turns back to the business of securing her son's throne. There are enough known threats to manage without spending energy on northern boys, whose names she barely knows. But she does not forget it. Cersei Lannister has survived 32 years in a world that did not make room for her by forgetting the things that could not be explained. She turns back to her work, and the name stays in the back of her mind, like a splinter she cannot quite reach. The fishing boat rounds the headland at dawn, and Dragonstone comes into view across the water, and Jon understands immediately why the Targaryens built their seat here. It is a volcanic island at the mouth of Blackwater Bay, dark and steep, rising from the sea in the way that things which have been shaped by fire rather than water tend to rise. Abruptly, without apology, with a kind of geological authority that makes the works of men on its summit look almost modest by comparison. The castle is not modest. It has been carved into the rock itself, the black stone shaped by Valyrian sorcery into forms that no ordinary mason could have cut. Towers that curve like the necks of dragons, walls that seem to grow from the cliffs below rather than stand on them. It is the ancestral seat of the Targaryen dynasty in Westeros, the place from which they launched the conquest 300 years ago, and it looks exactly like what it is. Ghost sits at the bow of the fishing boat with his red eyes on the castle, ears forward, absolutely still. Jon gets ashore without trouble. Dragonstone's garrison admits him at the gate. After a brief exchange in which Jon says only that he has business with Lord Stannis on a matter that cannot be put in a message, and that he is willing to wait as long as necessary. He waits for 2 hours in a cold antechamber beneath a stone ceiling carved with serpents before a steward comes for him. Stannis Baratheon is in the chamber with the painted table. He is standing at the table's edge when Jon is brought in, studying the carved map of Westeros that fills its surface. The painted wood showing every kingdom and castle and road in the realm. He is 34 years old, lean and hard, in the way that men who have never permitted themselves excess become hard, with short dark hair and a square jaw, and a way of holding his body that suggests he is always braced for something. He grinds his teeth as Jon enters, an unconscious habit, audible in the quiet of the room. His expression is not hostile, it is simply entirely closed. Ned Stark's bastard, Stannis says. It is not a greeting, it is an identification. Jon Snow, Jon says. Yes, you arrived on a fishing boat without announcement. Stannis does not look up from the painted table. You have no letter of introduction and no household guard, and you traveled without telling your lord father where you were going. You are 15 years old. He finally looks up. Give me one reason I should not have you escorted back to King's Landing. Because I have something you need, Jon says. He takes the documents from inside his cloak and lays them on the edge of the painted table. Septon Maynard's citadel notation, the parchment listing 3 names and a last known position. Stannis looks at them without touching them. Read them, Jon says. Stannis's eyes move to Jon's face, flat and measuring. Then he picks up the first document and reads. He reads slowly. He is not a man who skims. He reads the citadel notation through to the end, sets it down, picks up the second document, reads the 3 names and the Tower of Joy notation. He sets that down too. He looks at the painted table for a moment, at the carved shape of the kingdom spread beneath his hands. Then he picks up the citadel notation and reads it again. The annulment is dated, Stannis says. Before the Trident, Jon says. Before the rebellion ended, before Rhaegar died. Stannis sets the document down and grinds his teeth. He does not look at Jon. He looks at the painted table, at the point where the trident carves through the riverlands, at the ruby ford, where Robert killed Rhaegar and won the war that put his house on the throne. He is silent for long enough that Jon begins to wonder whether he will simply ask him to leave. If this is accurate, Stannis says at last, the claim precedes mine. Yes, not by preference or by political convenience, by the law of succession as it has been observed in the 7 kingdoms since the conquest. Yes, Jon says again, by law. Stannis grinds his teeth. His jaw works in the silence. There is no warmth in him, no excitement, no visible reaction to the enormity of what he is looking at. He is working through a legal problem the way a maester works through a text, systematically, looking for the error that will make the conclusion false. He finds none, and this visibly displeases him. Ned Stark has known this, Stannis says, the entire time, since 283 AC. Stannis looks at Jon with a new quality in his attention, something that is not quite contempt and not quite respect, and sits in the terrain between them. He is looking at a boy who has dark northern hair and grey eyes and no visible Targaryen quality about him whatsoever. And he is measuring what that means. What do you want from me? Stannis says. I want your backing, Jon says. I cannot walk into King's Landing and announce myself without a great lord behind the claim. The moment I do it alone, without support, Cersei puts an end to it, and to me before anyone has time to examine the documents. I need someone who will stand and say the evidence is real. I could take the documents, Stannis says, and present them myself, as evidence that Joffrey's throne is doubly illegitimate. His parentage is a lie, and the true Targaryen heir is living. You could, Jon says, and Tywin Lannister would destroy you for it before you finished the sentence. Because Tywin already has this information, and he has been holding it as a weapon for weeks, and he will not allow it to be used by someone he cannot control. Jon looks at the painted table, at the stone Casterly rock on the western coast, at the space Tywin occupies in the realm's geography. I am not offering you the information. I am offering you what Tywin offered me, but honestly. Stand beside me. Put your name and your fleet and your forces behind the claim. And when I take the throne, you serve as Hand of the King. Stannis stares at him. You would have what you have always wanted, Jon says. A realm governed by law, not by Lannister gold, not by the convenience of whoever has the most swords, by law, with a king who was made by law and a hand who believes in it. Stannis looks at the painted table, at the whole carved shape of the realm he has spent his life trying to hold to the standard it claims to hold itself to. He looks at it for a long time. The claim requires more than documents, he says at last. It requires testimony. The surviving witness at the Tower of Joy is the only living soul, besides Ned Stark, who was present at your birth. His word in front of witnesses would make this unassailable. I know where to find him, Jon says. It is not quite true yet, but it is true enough for this room. Stannis looks at him one more time. The jaw works. Something settles in his face. Not warmth, nothing like warmth, but a kind of resolution. The resolution of a man who has identified the correct course of action and is now committing to it regardless of whether he likes it. Bring me the witness, Stannis says. Then we will talk about fleets. Meanwhile, at Casterly Rock, a raven arrives. Tywin reads the message in his solar, with the sunset sea behind him, and his hands flat on the table. Jon Snow is not in King's Landing. He has been gone since before dawn. No one in the city knows where he went. Tywin sits very still for a moment. He looks at the wall. Then he calls for his master of knights. The banners go out within the hour. Tywin's army begins moving east toward the Riverlands, into the heart of the realm, the wide, fertile territory through which every road between the north and the south eventually passes. He does not yet have a pretext that will satisfy the other lords of Westeros. He will find one. He always finds one. The reality is simpler than any pretext. The board has shifted without his instruction. And when boards shift without his instruction, Tywin Lannister responds by putting enough soldiers in the field to shift it back. He has always had time. But time, as of this morning, has become somewhat less abundant than it was. Ned Stark is alone in King's Landing for the first time since arriving. And he knows what that means. Robert is dead. Jon is gone, riding east toward a Baratheon's castle, with a claim in his pocket, and no guarantee it leads anywhere safe. The small council is Cersei's now, assembled around Joffrey's golden head, the way a garrison assembles around a keep. Not because the keep is capable of defending itself, but because it is the point of defense that everything else is organized around. And Ned is still the hand of the king, technically, which means he is still in the building, and still with access to the ravens, and still, for the moment, not in chains. He uses the ravens while he still can. He writes to Stannis at Dragonstone, a message that says what it needs to say and no more. The throne is held by Cersei's bastard. The evidence of Joffrey's true parentage exists, and is held by the hand of the king, and the hand of the king is about to be in no position to act on it. He writes a second message to Winterfell. This one takes longer. He sits with the quill above the parchment for a time before he writes it, because once written, it cannot be taken back, and because the words he is about to set down will change things for everyone who reads them. Then, he writes it anyway, because there is nothing left to protect that is not already threatened. Jon is not my bastard. He is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, true-born by a secret marriage. He must not take the Night's Watch vows. Find him. The rest will follow. He sends both ravens. Then he waits. The Master of Whisperers intercepts the first one. The message to Stannis is taken from the Maester's rookery before it clears the city, caught by one of the network's quiet hands. Those unseen people who move through King's Landing collecting what passes between one place and another, and bringing it to the man who has spent decades making himself indispensable to. Whatever king sits the throne, the message is opened, read, and placed before the small council by morning. Cersei receives it with a stillness that has nothing to do with calm, the kind of stillness that precedes action rather than follows it. The message to Winterfell goes north. No one catches it in time. The arrests come at dawn. Ned's household guard dies in the Tower of the Hand's corridors, killed by gold cloaks and Lannister men who have been waiting for exactly this moment. Ned is taken alive, which is not a mercy so much as a deferral. He is a useful prisoner, while the succession is unsettled. The charges are treason, the hand of the king conspiring to deny Prince Joffrey his rightful throne. Sansa is in the Red Keep when it happens, and does not have time to run. She is 13 years old, and auburn-haired and blue-eyed, and she has been trying so hard, since arriving in King's Landing, to be everything that the Southern Court requires her to be. And she is taken hostage in the same corridors where she practiced being good at it. Arya is not where she is supposed to be when the gold cloaks come looking, which is the only piece of luck the morning produces. She slips out through the city's back ways with needle at her hip and disappears into King's Landing's lower streets. 9 years old and suddenly alone in a city of 500,000 strangers. Meanwhile, at Winterfell, Robb Stark reads his father's raven. He reads it once, standing in the great hall with the parchment held in both hands, and then he sits down and reads it again, and then a third time. The words do not change on any reading, which is a thing he notices without quite meaning to, as if some part of him is still expecting the message to rearrange itself into something more manageable if examined long enough. Catelyn reads it over his shoulder. She is 35 years old, auburn-haired and blue-eyed, and she has never been given a reason to love Jon Snow. She has believed for 15 years that he was Ned's bastard by another woman, the product of a brief infidelity that Ned brought home and raised in her house, and asked her to accept without explaining and without ever telling her the mother's name. She has accepted it the way a woman accepts what she cannot change. She has been cold to the boy because of what he represented and what she was never allowed to ask about. And she has never blamed herself for that coldness, because no one ever told her there was another way to understand it. She reads the message twice. Something moves in her face. Not warmth, not absolution. Nothing as simple as that. It is a reckoning. 15 years of Ned's silence on the one subject he never opened. His expression when Jon was mentioned. His refusal to name the mother. The particular quality of his care for the boy that always felt different from simple guilt. She has spent 15 years reading that silence as the shape of an infidelity. Now she reads it differently. She does not say anything. She steps back and lets Robb hold the parchment and think. Robb is 15 years old and has auburn hair and blue eyes that are his mother's entirely. And he has been running Winterfell in his father's absence with the quiet competence of a boy who has been training for exactly this kind of responsibility his whole life. He sets the parchment on the table and looks at the lords of his household standing in the hall. "Call the banners," he says. "The ravens go out before the hour is done." Mormont, Umber, Karstark, Glover, the ancient houses of the north that have answered Stark's summons for 8,000 years without requiring explanation or reassurance. They come because a Stark called, the same reason their fathers came and their fathers' fathers. And the northern host begins to gather at Winterfell's gates while Robb reads his father's message one more time and tries to understand what it means that he has a brother he has never met and a father in a cell in King's Landing, and a war to fight on two fronts simultaneously. He will manage. He always manages. At Dragonstone, the raven from King's Landing arrives before Jon and Stannis have finished working out the details of what they are about to attempt. And Stannis reads it with the expression of a man who has received information that confirms his analysis and finds no satisfaction in being right. "Ned Stark has been arrested," Stannis says. He sets the message on the painted table beside the carved shape of King's Landing. Treason charges. The household killed. His daughters are in the Red Keep. Jon takes the message from the table and reads it. He reads it quickly and then sets it down. "We move now," Jon says. "We do not," Stannis says. "The arrest strengthens our position. Joffrey has imprisoned the man who was investigating his illegitimacy, which is an admission of guilt by action if not by word. Every lord in the realm will see it. We let the arrest work on the political situation for a fortnight, and then we move with maximum support, rather than minimum." "My father is in a cell," Jon says. "Your father," Stannis says. And there is no cruelty in how he says it, only precision. Is a prisoner who will be kept alive as long as he is politically useful. They will not execute him immediately. There is no benefit in it. We have time. And if they decide he is no longer useful, before our fortnight is up." Stannis is quiet for a moment. He grinds his teeth. Ned Stark's living testimony is the northern voice for this claim. Jon says. He is the only person alive in King's Landing who can stand before the realm and say, "I was there. I carried the boy home. I made the promise. It is true," without him alive and speaking. You have documents that Cersei's maesters will call forgeries, and an allegation from a bastard boy with no land and no title. With him alive and confirmed, you have a chain of evidence that no one in the Seven Kingdoms can break. He looks at Stannis across the painted table. You told me yourself. The claim requires a witness. The silence between them is the silence of a man who has been presented with a logical argument he cannot defeat, and is determining whether he is willing to accept the conclusion. "We sail tonight," Stannis says. The fleet begins preparing before the sun is fully down. Jon stands on Dragonstone's battlements and watches the ships move in the harbour below, the sails unfurling in the evening light, and thinks about Ned in a cell somewhere in the Red Keep, and about Arya alone in the streets of King's Landing, and about everything that has been set in motion in the weeks since a fishing boat delivered him to this island. The clock that Tywin started has run down to its last hours. The Riverlands, in late autumn, smell of river water and turned earth and the smoke of 1,000 campfires. And the host that Robb Stark has marched south fills the roads from horizon to horizon. It is not a small force. The North has answered the Stark summons completely and without argument, because House Stark has been the House of the North for 8,000 years, and the bannermen who ride behind the grey direwolf do so out of something older than calculation. Mormont men from Bear Island, Umber giants from the last half, Karstark riders from Carhold, Glover soldiers from Deepwood Motte. They arrive in the Riverlands hard and cold and purposeful. Robb leads them at 15 years old, auburn-haired and blue-eyed, his mother's colouring on his father's bearing, riding with the calm of a young commander who has decided not to be afraid of what he does not yet know how to do. Riverrun sits where 3 rivers meet, the Tumblestone and the Red Fork and the small stream that gives the Tully seat its name, the red-walled castle built on a spit of land that its lords can flood at will to make it an island. The Tully's flag flies above it, the silver trout on blue and red, and the Tully household has opened the gates to the northern host that has arrived at their threshold. Catelyn Stark is here. This is her family's seat, the place she grew up, and she has come south, ahead of the army, with the message from Ned still in her hands and the understanding of what it means still settling into her, like cold water into stone. Jon arrives from the coast road in the morning, riding hard with Stannis' small advance company behind him, Ghost ranging at the horse's flank. He sees Robb before Robb sees him. His brother is standing in the outer yard with 2 of his commanders, pointing at something on a map spread across a barrel, and Jon is struck for a moment by the simple fact of him. 15 years old, and already the kind of presence that makes men stand straighter when he is nearby. Auburn hair, and the blue eyes that are nothing like Jon's own dark Stark colouring, and everything like the woman standing at the yard's edge, watching the gates. Then Robb looks up and sees him. He crosses the yard at a pace that is not quite running and grabs Jon by the arm with both hands, hard, the grip of someone who has been frightened for something and wants to make certain it is real. He says nothing. He does not need to say anything. Jon grips him back, and they stand like that for a moment in the middle of Riverrun's yard, while the commanders and the bannermen give them room. Then Robb steps back and says, "Show me." Jon takes the documents from inside his cloak, the same documents he showed Tywin in a solar above the Sunset Sea, the same documents he laid on Stannis' painted table at Dragonstone. Septon Maynard's citadel notation, the record of an annulment and a marriage before a heart tree, the parchment listing 3 names and a last known position: Arthur Dane, Oswell went. Gerald Hightower, Tower of Joy, Dawn, late 282 AC. He hands them to Robb. Robb reads. He reads carefully, in silence, with the same slow deliberateness their father uses when examining a document he needs to understand fully before he acts. Catelyn comes across the yard and reads over his shoulder. Jon watches her face. She is 35 years old, auburn-haired and blue-eyed, and she has been cold to Jon Snow for 15 years because she believed he was the evidence of her husband's faithlessness. She reads the notation about the annulment and the marriage. She reads the 3 Kingsguard names. She looks up from the parchment and looks at Jon, at his dark, stark hair and grey eyes, at the face she has looked at across dinner tables and in Winterfell's yard for 15 years, and always resented on behalf of her own pain. She does not embrace him, but something in her face lets go of something it has been holding, and what remains is not warmth exactly, but a kind of honesty, the shape of 15 years of misplaced resentment, resolving into the correct shape at last. She hands the parchment back to Robb and says nothing. Robb looks at the assembled northern lords and bannermen who have gathered in the yard and along the walls of Riverrun's outer keep. There are a great many of them. They have ridden south because a Stark called, and they are waiting to understand what they have ridden into. Robb hands the documents back to Jon. Then he gets down on one knee. The yard goes very still. The men on the walls stop moving. Robb Stark, heir to Winterfell, and commander of the northern host, and the young man who would have been king in the north if this war had gone the way the rest of them expected it to go, is kneeling in the mud of Riverrun's outer yard in front of a boy with dark hair and grey eyes who arrived from the coast road with a white direwolf at his heel. The North served the Starks for 8,000 years, Robb says, his voice carrying across the yard. And the Starks know who they serve. He looks up at Jon. If the true king of the Andals and the First Men has come home, the Starks are his. The silence that follows is the kind that falls before something breaks. Jon looks at the assembled lords and bannermen, at the men who have ridden hundreds of miles on a call from a house they have served longer than anyone can clearly remember. He thinks about Tywin Solar and the offer that was a leash. He thinks about Tyrion's voice in a dark corridor. He does not create kings, he creates instruments. He thinks about Ned in a cell in King's Landing, and Ned's promise to a dying girl in a tower in Dawn, and 15 years of silence that became a prison instead of protection. My name, Jon says, and his voice carries the same way Robb's did, clear across the yard, is Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar Targaryen, Prince of Dragonstone, and Lyanna Stark of Winterfell, true-born by marriage, witnessed and recorded. I was raised as Jon Snow. I was raised by Eddard Stark, who is the most honest man the North has ever produced, and I am asking him now to confirm what I have just told you. Once I have him out of the cell in King's Landing, where Cersei Lannister has put him. The silence after is a different kind. Not the silence before something breaks, but the silence after it already has. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, Cersei receives the intelligence from the Riverlands. She reads the report, standing at the window of her chambers in the Red Keep, golden-haired and green-eyed and very still. And, when she has finished reading it, she sets it down and makes a decision in the space of 2 breaths. Aegon Targaryen, the boy from the north, the one she noticed in the corridor, and filed away and did not pursue because there were enough known threats to manage. She should have pursued it. She will not make that mistake again. She calls for her counsel. Ned Stark must be executed before Jon reaches King's Landing. The execution must be public, on the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor, before the city's assembled population, so that there is no question about what happened, and no way to undo it after. With Ned dead, the living voice that could stand before the realm and confirm the claim is gone. Documents can be called forgeries. A dead man cannot speak. She will move faster than a boy on a coast road and a northern host on foot, and she will take the one piece off the board that gives the opposition its credibility. The order goes to the council before the hour is out. In the Riverlands, Tywin Lannister's banners are already visible on the eastern roads, his forces marching toward the Trident. But the gathering at River Run sits between those forces and King's Landing, larger than Tywin's riders reported, and it is no longer just a northern host marching to save a lord's father. It is a Targaryen claimant, with Stark bannermen at his back and Baratheon ships on the water. And the board has shifted so far from where Tywin placed his pieces that the old lion does not immediately see the correct next move. Jon rides south before dark, a small company around him and Ghost at the horse's side. The road to King's Landing open before him. Robb's host begins to march. To the east, the sea is dark, and somewhere on that water, Stannis Baratheon's fleet is turning the headland into the Blackwater Rush, sails dark against the evening sky, moving toward a city that does not know what is coming for it. The secret is out. The weapon that Tywin held for weeks, the private threat that gave him leverage over Ned and Jon and the entire board, is now a public fact, spoken aloud in a yard in the Riverlands before 1,000 witnesses. It cannot be suppressed. It cannot be controlled. It cannot be turned back into a secret. With that, the most dangerous information in the realm has moved from Tywin Lannister's hands into the open air of the world. And Tywin Lannister, for the first time in 40 years, is not sure what to do next. The great sept of Baelor sits on Visenya's hill, with its crystal dome catching the morning light, and the crowd that fills the plaza below it does not have the look of a congregation. It has the look of a city come to watch something it cannot stop. They press in from the alley mouths and the market stalls and the warrens of Flea Bottom, common folk who have had weeks under Joffrey's reign to learn what kind of king they have. The scaffold is raw timber on the sept's broad steps. The king's justice stands on it with ice in his hands. Ned Stark's own Valyrian steel greatsword, its dark rippled blade catching no light at all. Ned is brought out through the sept doors. He is 36 years old, dark-haired, grey-eyed, and he walks toward the scaffold the way he does everything. Straight ahead, without negotiation, his hands are bound behind him. He has been in a cell, and he looks it. But when he comes onto the steps, he lifts his head and finds the horizon, and the crowd's roar drops by half at that small motion. Joffrey sits on a litter to the right of the scaffold, elevated, golden-haired and green-eyed, a boy of 13 in a crown that does not quite fit him. He has the look of someone who wanted this, and now that it is here, does not feel what he expected. Cersei stands behind him, one hand on the litter's rail, green eyes moving across the crowd with the steadiness of a woman reading a room she believes she controls. Ned kneels. The king's justice steps forward. The crowd goes fully quiet. It is in that specific quiet that the sounds at the Lion Gate change. The noise shifts outward, the way water shifts when something large moves through it. A ripple of attention tracking west. And then the crowd at the plaza's edge opens, because Ghost is coming through it. The white direwolf moves without haste, red eyes scanning, and the people who step back for him do it before they have quite decided to. The crowd parts all the way to the steps. Jon comes through behind him. He is 15, road-dusty, dark-haired, grey-eyed, with the face of someone who has had everything soft stripped out of the last several months. He rides to the plaza's edge, dismounts, and walks up the sept steps. He stops below the scaffold and looks at Ned. Ned looks back, The moment between them is brief and contains 15 years. Then Jon turns toward Joffrey. "I call for judgment," Jon says, and the square is quiet enough that it carries to the edges. Judgment by the lawful king. The man on his knees has committed no treason against a rightful throne, because the throne is not rightfully held. He looks at Joffrey's golden face. "My name is Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar Targaryen, Prince of Dragonstone, and Lyanna Stark of Winterfell, true-born by a secret marriage recorded at the Citadel and witnessed before a heart tree in 282 AC. By the law of succession, the claim precedes the one you are holding. I am asking for the release of the prisoner." The silence after is not the silence of a crowd waiting. It is the silence of a crowd that has been handed something it has not yet worked out what to do with. Joffrey's face moves through the anger first, the flush of being contradicted in public, and then, through something underneath it, the part of him that is 13 years old, in a square full of strangers who are very quiet and not looking at him with fear. His hand grips the litter's armrest. He does not speak. He looks at Cersei. Cersei looks back and says something low against the crowd noise, and her lips are steady and her eyes are steady, and for the space of that exchange, the execution could still happen. The king's justice has not moved. The sword is still raised. Then Ned lifts his head. He has been looking at the ground. He looks up and sees Jon on the steps below him, with road dust on his cloak and the white direwolf in the square, and something in his face releases the specific expression of a man who has been carrying a promise for 15 years and is now being told by the shape of the morning that the time for carrying it quietly is over. "It is true," Ned says. "The square is still enough that it carries to the far edge of the plaza. I am Eddard Stark," he says. "I was at the Tower of Joy in Dawn in 283 AC when Lyanna Stark died. She asked me to protect her son. I carried him home and raised him as my bastard, and I kept the secret for 15 years because his life required it." He pauses, and his voice is steady, the voice of a man who has never been able to lie under pressure and who has stopped trying. "The boy is Aegon Targaryen, Rhaegar's son, true-born. I swear it on my house and my honor before whatever gods are listening." The crowd does not erupt. It goes deeper into its stillness, the stillness of something large and quiet, settling rather than something fast and loud tearing through. Joffrey has gone the color of old parchment. He says nothing. He is looking at Cersei and not looking away from Cersei, because looking away means looking at the square, and the square has become a place he does not know how to be in. Cersei says something urgent and rapid, and Joffrey's mouth opens and closes, and the order does not come. The sails appear on the Blackwater. They come around the river's eastern bend, too many to count quickly, dark against the morning sky, moving with the wind toward the harbour mouth. Stannis Baratheon's fleet, which left Dragonstone when Jon argued the case before the painted table. The crowd's attention splits between the scaffold and the river, and Cersei's order, when she finally speaks it aloud, is swallowed by 10,000 people turning to watch the sails. From the South Road, the standards are visible on the horizon, the grey direwolf on white field. Robb Stark's host, still too far to reach the city before nightfall, but close enough for anyone on the walls to read the banner. The king's justice does not swing ice. He stands on the scaffold and holds Ned's sword and looks at Joffrey, and Joffrey does not look at him. The moment when the execution should happen passes and becomes a different kind of moment, the kind that cannot go back to what it was before. Ned's bonds are cut by a scaffold guard without an order given. The guard does it anyway. The quiet decision of a man who has read the morning correctly and wants to be on the right side of the accounting. Ned rises. At Casterly Rock, the ravens arrive in sequence, and Tywin reads them at the table where he laid the documents that began this. The first raven, then the second, then the third. He sets each one down with the stillness of a man receiving news he did not account for. He has built 40 years of political architecture. He has never been outmaneuvered by a boy of 15, and he is not entirely certain he has been outmaneuvered now. What he knows is that the board no longer looks like the board he designed, a Targaryen with northern loyalty and Baratheon iron, and a living stark witness has spoken his name before a city of 500,000 people. There is no private lever left to pull. Whatever comes next will have to be built from different pieces than the ones he started with. He picks up his quill. He does not put it down for a long time. In the plaza before the Great Sept, the crowd does not disperse. It stands in the morning light and watches the scaffold and the man who is no longer kneeling, and the boy with the dire wolf who has not moved from the steps. Ghost moves to Jon's side and sits. Jon looks up at the red keep on Aegon's high hill, at the dark towers that have held every king since Aegon the Conqueror raised them. He looks at it the way a person looks at something they have been told is theirs and have not yet decided what to feel about that. He is not king yet. The man at Casterly Rock is not done. The woman behind Joffrey is not done. There is a realm of 7 kingdoms and 1,000 years of wounds that will not close because one boy said his name in a square. He knows all of this, but Ned is alive. Ned is alive and standing on the Sept steps above him, and what passes between them is not a word. It is 15 years of silence, finally allowed to end. Ghost's tail moves once against the paving stones. The fleet rounds the harbour mouth, and the sails fill with morning wind. And King's Landing holds its breath, and Jon Snow, Jon Targaryen, stands in the square in his own name for the first time in his life. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share,